How many roads must a man walk down before walking the man? Just how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in sand? Just how many times must a cannonball fly before my friend is blowing in the wind. Yes, the bird is blowing in the wind. How many times must a woman look up before she can sleep at side? Just how many years must one man have before he can hear for ride? Just how many deaths will it take till you know? And too many people have died. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Good morning. I'm Scott Finley, and I will be your service coordinator on this beautiful fall morning. Jesse is our Zoom host, and Sandy is at GNUUC lighting candles in the chalice. We are glad you're with us today. If you're a visitor, we're especially happy to see you. Please visit nashvilleuu.org/guestbook to sign up for our newsletter. Today's chalice lighting words come from Starhawk.
We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere. That song, that song is a ballad, and a ballad is a song that tells a story. And today we're going to talk about stories, and especially the way the stories can heal us, because healing is our theme for this month. And I'll say more about that in the sermon. But this is a Time for All Sages story, and it's a story about a symbol that you will recognize, and you'll see in any Unitarian Universalist place, and maybe you even have this symbol in your home or in you, and maybe you have some jewelry like a necklace or something with this symbol, and it's a really important one for us. I read in the story that if you see this symbol, you know there are UUs somewhere around. But I'm going to tell why it's a symbol that is a healing symbol. So it really there were Unitarians and Universalists around before the symbol was. It was something that we adopted in the World War II. And Unitarians were being persecuted and also put in death camps, as well as Jewish people, gay people, Roma, who some people call gypsies, and many other people, educated people, professors, and lots of others by the Nazis during World War II. And so Unitarians from here and from other places in Europe established an organization to try to get as many of those people who were in danger out of Germany and out of the Nazi occupied countries. And they needed a symbol. because when they would go into these countries secretly, like spies in a way, they didn't speak the same language as the people they had to sort of smuggle out. So the man who led the the resistance and the organization to get, that was the Unitarian Service Committee, which is now the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. He turned to someone he knew from Czechoslovakia, a man named Hans Deutsch, and he asked him to help him come up with a symbol. And so this man suggested a flaming chalice. And he suggested a flaming chalice because it was a Czechoslovakian symbol. And so the cup, the cup really represents the healing potion or the healing drink, and also the idea of everyone drinking from the same cup. But it can mean a lot of things. And people use it to mean, also the idea that all of our ideas and our beliefs can come together in one bowl, kind of a thing. But also the flame is really important, because the flame we take with us and we hold with us in our hearts, and we light the flame of hope. So we keep it alive even when we're not together in our congregation. So the other thing I want to tell you is there was a woman who got put into the camps, and she survived. And she was from Czechoslovakia, so she knew that symbol. She knew that flaming chalice symbol even before the Unitarian Service Committee adopted it. And she told people when she came out that the thing that she used to do every day, and I'm going to do this here while I'm talking to you, is she would draw that symbol in the dirt with her finger. Nobody knew what it meant. So she would draw it in the dirt. And you can draw it in the dirt yourself. You should go outside, not right now, but a little bit later today, because it's a beautiful day. And you just make something that looks like a smile. I'm drawing in dirt. I couldn't figure out what to draw it on. And then I thought, oh, I live on a farm. I can just go outside and get some dirt. Something that looks like a smile. And then something that just looks like a little, like a little tree trunk below it. And then make something like an easy sort of looking flame at the top. And there you have a flaming chalice. But also beneath it, she would write the words Pravda Vitesi. Pravda, Pravda, Vitezi. Vitezi is like vital, it's like life. And that's what it means. It means truth lives, or truth survives. Truth goes on. Now I'm going to show you what I drew. I can't pick it up because it's dirt. It'll go all over the place. There's the chalice. And there's the words. Pravda Vitezi. It shows you how people hang on. Even in the worst circumstances, we remember, and we can help other people to remember too, that truth will survive. And Universalists believe that. They believe that we make our own heaven here on earth, and that people who don't tell the truth create their own hell in this lifetime. So don't forget how important that symbol is, and that story that goes with that symbol. It's a true story, and it's important.
Our Share the Plate organization this November is Room in the Inn. Their program provides safe shelter, warm meals, and fellowship for our neighbors struggling with homelessness during the winter. This pandemic will be increasing homelessness and threatening the health of the homeless. Room in the Inn can use our financial support all the more this year. There are 3 ways you can donate. At NashvilleUU.org, click Donate and choose the account Share the Plate or Pledge. You can also text in your donation to 615-246-5553. include an amount plus the account. Or you can mail a check to GNUUC at 374 Hicks Road, Nashville, Tennessee 37221. Add pledge or share the plate in the memo line. For our meditation today, please sing along with Allie Halpert's Loosen, Loosen.
Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
So many of us are probably letting go a little bit today if we've been anxious for the last many days. But today's homily or sermon is not going to be about that. We're going to talk about healing and about how stories can help us heal, but stories can also be harmful. And the scripture, if you will, for today is a poem by Ada Limon. It's called Wonder Woman. Standing at the swell of the muddy Mississippi after the urgent care doctor had just said, "Well, sometimes shit happens," I fell fast and hard for New Orleans all over again. Pain pills swirled in the purse along with a spell for later. It's taken a while for me to admit I'm in a raging battle with my body. A spinal column 35 degrees bent, vertigo that comes and goes like a DC Comics villain nobody can kill. Invisible pain is both a blessing and a curse. "You always look so happy," said a stranger once, as I shifted to my good side, grinning. But that day, alone on the riverbank, brass blaring from the steamboat Natchez, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a girl, maybe half my age, dressed for no apparent reason as Wonder Woman. She strutted by in all her strength and glory, invincible, eternal, and when I stood to clap, because who wouldn't have, she bowed and posed like she knew I needed a myth, a woman by a river, indestructible. I've read some other poetry by Ada Limon, and I've really liked her poems. So when this one came my way the last week or two, I was excited about the story that it told. Her poems are very story-like and visual. So I started reading a little bit about her, the poet. I wondered, because I also have an invisible, illness, I wondered, like, is this autobiographical poem? And it is. She says that all her poems really are autobiographical. But I found out some other things about her. And what they made me think about is the stories that we tell ourselves about people and groups of people, and the assumptions that we make based on those stories. By her name and by looking at a photograph of her, I had already decided that she was a Latina woman, and therefore, she probably spoke Spanish. She, or maybe her parents or grandparents, were probably immigrants. And some other thing, maybe I'd assume that she was a Democrat, But in fact, the first thing I found out about her is that she lives in Lexington. Who knew? She moved there after I moved out of Lexington, but nonetheless, I still know a lot of the writing community there. And I didn't know Ada Limon lived there. She has dealt with infertility and also chronic health issues. She's a Latina, yeah. So one of her parents is of Mexican descent, but many generations American. And she doesn't speak Spanish at all. She probably doesn't speak any more Spanish than I do, just barely enough to get by, she says. And so I was making these assumptions, like one of the things that I was thinking about yesterday was that, all Hispanics or most Hispanics must be Democrats. I think a lot of us were thinking that. But I read a really interesting article about Cubans, and I got it because Cubans, of course, I went to Cuba, and of course, Cubans feel very differently about politics because of their experience and also with their own stories that they tell themselves and one another. right or for wrong. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about these personal stories, also some of our collective stories about history, and some of these universal myths that underlie it, and how these things can be harmful to us and can stymie us in some ways, and also how they can be healing too. And then next week I'll go more into kind of the family myths and stories as we prepare for some holiday togetherness, be it in person or virtual. So we're all characters in, as well as tellers of, a never-ending, vast, complicated, plot twisting, sometimes boring, sometimes surreal story. We may feel as if we have no agency, like in a dream where we're just carried along by, soon forgotten images and sensations, and seemingly helpless, like we feel in a dream, to resist or to affect the outcome. In reality, we can change the story of our own lives. I don't mean we can change everything that happens to us, but we can change the story, because we are the tellers of the part of the story that is about us. I think it was Joseph Campbell who said, "You are the hero of your own story." How about that woman that I talked about, who was in the Nazi camps, extermination camps? She could have told her story of survival very differently. She made it something by what she thought and what she told. So these stories, these personal stories, at once tragic, hopeful, beautiful, meaningless, and stupendous, they're not true once and for all, in the sense that our vision is limited by time and by education and by understanding. And they are colored by our and by others' perceptions, our pasts and our present. They may not even be factual, but they are true in another deeper sense of the word, in that they determine what we make of our lives. They determine our responses to life's challenges and passages. So to the extent that we recognize them and, yes, repeat them over and over, we have agency to choose which ones we will accept and which ones we will replace. My oldest son was born 38 years ago after I lost my first child to a miscarriage. His birth was very difficult, as first births often are, and I ended up having a cesarean. Later, I got involved in the Leche League, which is a women's breastfeeding group, and I learned a lot. I learned not only about natural parenting and child rearing and natural food and all these things, but I learned about how to have a natural birth after having a cesarean. And so I got involved in these classes, which were really revolutionary in the early 1980s for my second birth. And I started to go to these classes, and they were kind of like underground classes then. That you weren't supposed to do that if you had a cesarean. You were supposed to have another one, at least where I lived. And so you had to do some kind of like sneaky, surreptitious things, like stay home until you were far along in labor and things like that. But my next two children were born completely natural. And, at these classes, what they taught us to do, there were 5 couples, was to change the narrative that we had accepted about childbirth. I'm not saying that no one ever needs a cesarean. Please don't misinterpret me. But the proportion of cesareans that were being done at that time was way higher than it needed to be. And so we did guided imagery, and we went back over like the stories that had been told to us and that we had kind of like taken in throughout our lifetime. And I was thinking, at first I was like, well, my mother wasn't even around, so how could she have told any stories about it? But, well, first of all, my husband then, my first husband, he went to the first meeting and we did the guided imagery. And then he was like, got home and he was like, we just got in the car and he's like, I'm never going back to that class again. That was weird. And I had never done guided imagery ever before, but I went back by myself. And I went to all the classes with 4 other couples and then just me. And that was probably, along with going to the late J League, probably like the beginning of my I guess, rebellion against, the provincial world, because then later I went to the Unitarian Church and it was all over after that. But this idea of changing the narrative, after a couple of times with this imagery, guided imagery and stuff, I realized that, yeah, somebody had said at some point, your mother probably having to carry 2 such big babies. I was a twin and we were over 7 pounds. That probably strained her heart and that was why she died. And like, I don't even remember now who said that. It was a relative or somebody, but that really stuck with me. And I think the story, like the core belief that I had, was that my body doesn't work, my body will fail. The body will fail. The female body will fail you. And it's been a lifelong, and continues, to be a lifelong journey to counter that narrative. But finding it out, that was a big step. So for you, you know what your core story is? Is it I have to be perfect or else I'm all wrong? Is it I'll never win? Is it people will always leave me? You might not know it right now, but finding out what the core story that you have believed and how it's determined your choices, and or maybe how you learn to stop believing it. It's a big step and a spiritual step. Oops. Now, the collective stories that we listen to, that we believe, and that we tell one another. I was a high school teacher. And this is before the whole childbirth thing and Unitarian Universalism. I was only 22 when I started teaching high school for 5 years. I taught history and social studies, and even though I was an English major, and we had a brand newly published textbook, and it opened up with a chapter about Black cowboys. This was in the late 1970s, and it went on to deconstruct the damaging philosophy of manifest destiny. And I thought this was so radical and revolutionary and cool. And I even remember playing that song by the Eagles, the one I played, or that we played for you at the beginning of the service. I played it for the kids in the class, and I explained to them why that was about manifest destiny. And at that time, I on the surface, though, I was very conservative, and I had no idea, like I never made the slightest connection that I myself was a product of that, like that the people from whom I was descended were the people that came here and assumed that they had the right to take over this land and to drive, the native people out and also enslave people of color. So these stories are just, when you begin, maybe when you get older, and I think nowadays younger people too, you know, to question them. It's really deep, it is spiritual, and it matters. It affects what we do day by day and how we teach the younger people in our lives. So I would say that I had within me the seeds of recognition that I had swallowed way too many lies and manufactured stories. That was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Some of you guys weren't even born then. In those 40 years, we have seen many, many Wonder Women and men and persons. We have witnessed the untelling and retelling of many foundational stories. Those of us that are old and older, I think we're seeing this speed up. As difficult and challenging and unpleasant and really horrifying as it is sometimes, I think we are seeing the untelling of these damaging stories speed up. Our institutions, our systems, and our communities have made great strides. Not enough, not nearly enough. But the problem with myths and stories that disempower some at the gain of others is that they are enshrined, that they are made official, they're put in textbooks, they're told over and over again. You know, just like you can do that chant over and over and it's healing, then you can make people do something like a Pledge of Allegiance or a prayer over and over again, and it's harmful. Making them hard to erase or to challenge. The stories that uphold our systems of politics, healthcare, business, education, law enforcement, and even entertainment and sports are entangled, and they're made permanent by statues, buildings, laws, unions, mascots, flags, rituals, assemblies, charities, lobbyists, as well as by the drugging, the imprisonment, the disenfranchisement, and the disempowerment of those who are most affected by the lies they disguise. Stories matter. So what are the stories that we need to unlearn in order to heal together? Now, universal stories. On Halloween, I was driving my little granddaughter to be, Willow, from our farm back to Lexington, about 45 minutes. And we had an extended conversation. She had to give me a Cheeto for every Trump flag we passed. She said to me, when are we going to get out of Trump land? We saw the incredibly gorgeous orange blood moon rising. It was such a beautiful moment. And she said, someday I want to go to the moon. I'm going to fly to the moon. And I said, well, you have to be trained, you know, as an astronaut. You have to go to school for a long time. And she said, no, I'll just go with an astronaut. And I said, well, you still have to train because, you know, I mean, what if the astronaut faints? She's like, no, I'll just wake them up. I said, well, what if they die? I mean, I was injecting reality into her little 5-year-old fantasy, which wasn't necessary. And then she went on wondering about some other things. And I said, you know, there's just some things that nobody understands yet. I said, you know, some people call that God and some people just call it mystery. I like to call it mystery. And she's quiet for a second. And then she said, well, I bet Siri understands it. She always asks Siri, you know, everything on the phone. I don't want to live to see the day that Siri knows everything. I love mystery. I love stories. I like myths, and I love hearing and telling healing stories. They don't have to be factual to be true. You know, Wonder Woman. I hope I don't disappoint anybody that it's not factual, but it's true. I believe we can keep retelling our own story until we understand it in a way that is loving and compassionate toward ourselves and toward those around us. I challenge you to try this. And next week, we will look at family myths and stories and how they can harm and also heal. Wonder Woman is actually based upon a Greek myth. And we can evoke myth and tap into universal archetypal myths and themes for meanings. I think this is probably going to already start happening with Kamala Harris. But ultimately, it is our own lives, our own communities, and our families' stories that we are telling. Religions are one of the primary ways that harmful myths are transmitted, and helpful ones too. They are embedded in our psyche and they are institutionalized. Myths that trigger shame, perfectionism, judgment, separation, and false idols. And that's what brought some of us here. Unitarian Universalism is and has been perfectly suited for these times because we have always questioned the harmful myths and narratives that exclude, that disempower, that oppress, that subjugate and separate humans, and that destroy creation. We want to be a faith community with a different story, changing the narrative, and this is no small feat. We've been at it for 465 years, and we still have unturned stones and obstacles to overcome. We still have work to do. That day alone on the riverbank, brass blaring from the steamboat Natchez. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a girl, maybe half my age, dressed for no apparent reason as Wonder Woman. She strutted by in all her strength and glory, invincible, eternal, and when I stood to clap, because who wouldn't have? She bowed and posed like she knew I needed a myth, a woman by a river, indestructible. So be it.
I love to tell the story. What are we doing now?
And folks, stand by just for a minute. We have some computer difficulties. We'll be hearing a Fran sing "I Love to Tell the Story" here momentarily. Sorry for the delay.
I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story. I love.
This ends the live stream portion of today's service. Our Zoom host will now turn off the YouTube link. So thank you to those of you watching on YouTube.